So the purpose of this conversation and future conversations on this channel is education, understanding, and growth. I have no intention of hostility and wish for all parties involved or discussed to live happy, fruitful lives. To outline my background, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I support the teachings of David D. Friedman, Russell Brand, and Michael Malice. My guest today is Jeffery Shull. Would you like to say a brief outline of what you believe in your current political beliefs and your activities?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jeffrey Shull. I'm a libertarian. Um, I lean more towards like free market, small government, preferably no government. But um, I'm currently on the executive committee of the Libertarian Party of Georgia and a state organizer for the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus as well.
Awesome. So very active in your state.
Oh yeah.
We're going to get started with our first question here. And these questions are not intended to be, like shots. I'm not shooting anybody down. These are just questions for us all, just like to grow and learn. First question is: are all humans intelligent? Why or why not?
I feel like most are intelligent in their own way. Like, it just depends on your environment. People learn what they need to learn to get by, or, just what piques their interest. It also depends on how you define intelligence. But, you take someone with like an academic background that's like a doctor, they're intelligent in that specific way. Whereas you take someone that's a farmer who might not have the same type of intelligence, but, you switch them around and neither person is going to do very well.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. All humans are intelligent. I think that's an important thing that a lot of people don't consider, especially people that are like hardcore Democrat or like hardcore Republican. I feel like they genuinely believe that the other side is just stupid. Like there's no way that they could possibly believe what the other person believes.
Oh yeah, it creates a middle gap, so you don't have to actually consider the other side's views.
Right. It's just not fair. So, as a libertarian, that's where this next question comes from. Capitalism is inherently evil and will only ever result in an abuse of power. Is this true or is this false?
It's definitely false. Economic systems, this side of fascism, can't really be evil. It just depends on, who's involved and what they're allowed to get by with. Inherently, like capitalism, if we're talking like free market capitalism, it really can't be evil because, why would I do a transaction with you that's not beneficial or even harmful to myself?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a system that we currently are unfortunately dealing with, when you have, state-backed, corporations and pretty much corporatism, they kind of get to pick and choose the winners. So we're almost coerced into, holding up these giant corporations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put so many obstacles in the way of, the average person starting a business. So I feel like this form of capitalism, which, I would call like crony capitalism, is evil just because it's being dictated by people who are inherently evil.
Yeah. So capitalism in itself is not evil, but it can become evil when the state is involved.
Well, if the state didn't lean towards, attracting evil people,
mm-hmm.
then maybe it wouldn't be an issue. But when it becomes manipulated by people with bad intentions, then it definitely is.
Fair enough. All humans are trying to create a better world. Is this true or false?
I think it's true, even if it's just, their personal world.
Mm-hmm.
And that can lead to an overall decline of the world condition, though, depending on how much power they have.
Mm-hmm.
Like dictators, they are trying to create a better world for themselves,
Right.
at the cost of everyone else.
Yeah, because like I think about even in his own mind, someone like Hitler was in his own messed up way, he considered himself an idealist. Like he was doing what he thought was correct for how he saw the worldview.
Oh yeah, he was, he had a plan. It was a terrible plan, along with, just about every other despot. But yeah, that was the world he wanted to see. He didn't really care, what it cost.
Right. So libertarians are for gun rights.
Hmm.
Do you own a gun? Why or why not?
I personally don't, mostly because honestly, there's no real reason. I just don't.
Sure.
But I definitely feel like people should be able to. I mean, it's definitely integral to self-defense. And honestly, if you look at how certain other countries are getting treated, it it can be a deterrent for oppressive governments. I mean, look at New Zealand and Australia, how they're, locking people up in camps just, under the potential threat of COVID.
Right.
It's no coincidence that countries that generally get disarmed by their government end up in situations like that. I mean, this is an extreme example, but like Pol Pot in Cambodia, his
Hmm.
first maneuver was to, take away everyone's armaments. Then he
Yeah.
swept in, the whole Khmer Rouge situation. It's not a crazy thought, to have that can happen anywhere. I
Hmm.
feel like we're kind of conditioned to think that, well, I mean, look at state schools. We're taught that the government's on our side. They would never do anything like that. While at the same time, we're taught about the founding fathers who definitely did not share that opinion.
Right. So, and a lot of people make the argument of, oh, well, when gun laws were like originally put in place, like when we originally founded the country, it took 20 minutes to reload a gun, that kind of thing, and that inherently makes it a different situation for today. But the principles, I think you're arguing, still stand.
Oh yeah, especially in this kind of time period where everything happens so fast. If the government wanted to come in, and try to seize all of its citizens, it could do it pretty quickly and pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
It's probably the only thing they do efficiently.
Yeah. They like control.
Oh yeah, everything else it can go on the back burner, but
Yeah.
you know,
So, and this next question is something that I personally believe. Traditionalists, whether religious or cultural, um, hinder progress. Do you believe that's true?
it can be, but I don't think it's inherently true. Traditionalists can kind of keep an anchor to like what worked in the past when considering future endeavors.
Hmm.
But at the same time, if you're too stuck to tradition, then it can definitely be a hindrance. It's hard to grow when you're stuck, doing what they did 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, just because people did it in the past doesn't necessarily make it the best actions for today. Not that there's anything wrong with it in the time, but you got to be able to grow with time as well.
Yeah, for sure. And which, I mean, funny enough, the statements that, and I understand that we addressed this, but the statements that you just made are, those are arguments that people make for gun control, is because like, oh, it was back then, but then it's not now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of people who don't understand why, others feel the need to have guns for protection,
Mhm.
I feel like they're living a privilege they don't realize, because there's places that you can walk down the street any time of day, leave your doors unlocked, but on the same hand, there's places that are the complete opposite of that.
Hmm.
It's dangerous just to be in your house.
Yeah.
High violence, high property crime. It's things that a lot of people don't have to deal with, and they don't even consider that side of the argument.
Hmm. So curing both hunger and homelessness in America, according to experts, would cost around $45 billion a year. The yearly federal budget is around 4.7 trillion. So what that means is approximately 0.09% of the yearly federal budget would fix homelessness and hunger in America. Why aren't more people talking about this? Is this something that we should be talking about and pushing for?
I think we should definitely talk about it. I don't know about pushing it, just given how, even though that money's already there, it'll invariably end with a tax increase. And, taxes hit the people that they're supposed to help the most.
Yeah.
And then you have to consider, how long would it end homelessness and, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because people don't like to think about it, but the natural condition of being a living organism is poverty.
Mm-hmm.
It's only recently in the last 150, 200 years that's been, way less of an issue. People want to talk about how the world's getting worse. You go back 100 years and, the poverty level is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now it's down to between like 8 and 10% of the world lives in poverty. I mean, poverty's bad. It's an awful thing, but that's still a pretty good improvement.
Yeah.
And, starvation and hunger and homelessness, they kind of go hand in hand, but they're separate issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got to consider how long will that do that, and just if it's a sustainable, procedure, then I think if we're going to have the money spent anyway, it's
Right.
better to go to that than war in some third world country that are dealing with those same issues.
Yeah, that's a lot of my thought behind it is that look, they're already spending all this money. They're clearly not backing down on spending any less. So if you're going to put it anywhere, you might as well put it towards people who need it. But historically, yeah, I believe you are correct. Where it's like if they propose something like this, they'd be like, oh, but we need more money because we need absolutely every other cent that we're already using.
Oh yeah, and a really good example of how just inefficient and terrible they are with those kind of programs. Look
Mm-hmm.
at like LA, for example, has a just so much anti-homeless legislature being passed, and at the same time they have some of the worst homeless rates.
Right.
So if these policies worked, then wouldn't we see the opposite?
Mm-hmm.
And this is in an area with already just terribly high taxes. And they were talking about doubling them earlier this year. I mean, what are they
Oh wow.
doing with them?
Right.
See, if it was any other entity, saying this kind of stuff, it would be taken way more seriously, because they've proven themselves to be completely ineffective and inefficient.
Yeah.
They even put in anti-homeless architecture while saying that they care about the homeless. You know, it's a little silly.
Yeah. So do you think that um, with the number being around 45 billion, um, obviously that's a ton of money for an individual, but do you think that we should be, like addressing people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and being like, hey, can you help? You know, is that right of us to ask them to do that?
It's right to ask. It's not right to force, I don't believe. An act's not moral if you're forced to do it.
Hmm. That's a good quote. I like that. So, one of my favorite questions. Um, what if taxes were optional? What would happen? Who would pay them?
Um, Probably nobody.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be a bad thing. It would allow communities to set up contracts like private organizations, and everyone pay voluntarily to fund their communities.
Mm.
Whether that would happen or not, it depends. Honestly, I don't think they would get paid. All the people talking about wanting to raise taxes and, how paying taxes is moral, I don't think they would pay it either. They would
Yeah.
instantly see how much the government takes from them. I mean, people celebrate tax returns, but then don't think about what small percentage that is of what they've actually, took from you.
Right.
And especially with federal taxes, people want to talk about how much it helps, from infrastructure and things like that. But most of that is military spending. Most of our federal taxes go to bombing, places that we're told are evil. But are they?
Right.
And a lot of places we're not even told about. Look at Yemen, look at Somalia. It's ridiculous. So I really feel like, no, people wouldn't pay taxes.
Yeah. And I think that it creates a very interesting, thought bubble of it's like, oh, wow, if nobody paid taxes, the people in power would lose their power, or at the very least suddenly become much more accountable as to what they're spending the money on. It's like, okay, look, I will pay taxes if it'll go towards our schools and towards our roads and, like towards homeless and all of this like good stuff. I think it would change everything.
That's probably why why they don't do that. You could leverage that for transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's their salaries are tied to that, and you can't mess with that.
Right. Which, I mean, in fairness, is the same argument, in a way, a similar argument that we're making of, it's my money and I need it now. So it's like,
oh yeah. See, the difference is they're taking it from people who work for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about, having their power, but they shouldn't have power. They're civil servants.
Mm-hmm.
Like glorified civil servants, and for some reason are put on a pedestal.
Yep.
Some reason.
So there's been a lot of talk recently about inflation, how it's increased like so much, like in the last 2 years alone. Do you think that stuff like cryptocurrency is a solution to inflation?
It's definitely a potential solution. It's kind of like what Ron Paul talked about during some of his campaigns about, decentralizing the currency.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it comes from, the Federal Reserve having so much power over our economy.
Yeah.
So, cryptocurrency could be a solution. A big solution would be either auditing or just downright abolishing the Federal Reserve. Woodrow Wilson really put us in a bind with that one.
Yeah.
I
Did
mean,
he, and just educate me here, did Woodrow Wilson start the Federal Reserve, or how long has that Federal Reserve been around? I don't even know.
1913.
1913. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Him and some of his cronies got together, and that was the end result.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit in depth, a bit too in depth to go in here, but
Sure.
yeah, it definitely started a downward spiral with our currency and our economy.
Mm-hmm.
Then when Nixon took us off the gold standard, it can't, if you have nothing to physically back your currency, inflation is almost gonna always happen.
Yeah.
I'm no economics expert, but
Sure.
I mean it's all perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have the power to just, since there's nothing to back it, you don't have to worry about overprinting money since it's all perceived value. But then you take away the scarcity, which drives the value down, which causes inflation.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of that is the Federal Reserve and the federal government just having unlimited printing power. So by like you said, with the Bitcoin and crypto and things like that, you kind of take that power away from them, and there's only a finite amount of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need that to stabilize your economy and your currency.
And people trash on Bitcoin a lot, which I mean I understand, and the culture behind it can very much be trashed upon.
Oh yeah.
At times, but like specifically with Bitcoin, if I'm not mistaken, there's already been like a finite amount created, and there never will be more. Is that correct?
That I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But
and I realize you're not a crypto expert.
But no. But a lot of people argue against it because, well, it's only valued at that because that's what people value it at.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, that's how markets work.
Yep.
I mean, consumer wants and scarcity determine the value of something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of people don't consider.
It's funny. I was watching an episode of Seinfeld last night, and he bought a pack of juicy fruit for 85 cents, and he said no, that's absurd, which I find hilarious because a pack of juicy fruit now is going to cost you at least $1.50.
Oh yeah.
And it's like that was like 97 that episode came out.
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy to think within our lifetime how much the dollar has decreased in value.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of been it fluctuates, but it's been in a steady decline since we lost the gold standard for sure.
Mm-hmm. And there was even just to reference a time period is why I'm referencing the Seinfeld episode. But like they talked about a Cadillac had a value of $22,000, which is like Cadillacs are like at least 50 now. It's just the whole thing is crazy.
Oh yeah.
So if nobody would pay their taxes if they were given the choice, and the government is not using our money correctly in the first place, does that make tax evasion moral or a noble deed?
I would say both.
Okay.
People want to bring up Robin Hood and things like that, but Robin Hood was robbing the taxpayers, or not the taxpayers, I'm sorry, the tax collectors, and giving it back to the people they took it from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is it used for besides, American imperialism, spreading our version of democracy? And it better be our version, otherwise, we're in there pretty quickly. Yeah. I mean, and most of the things people bring up, the taxes pay for, mostly local taxes anyway. But, okay, let's take the road example, right?
Right.
We don't need the state to provide roads. Plus, what they tax us for roads, who knows what that goes for?
Mm-hmm.
If the average person is smart, they know what they need. They know what they need for their family to thrive. You need roads. Mm-hmm. So I feel like people would voluntarily pay for things like that. Yeah. And it would be much cheaper. Plus, if you're dealing with private companies instead of, say, like, the state road crews, you can shop around, you can find the best performance for the best price. Right. And they have an incentive to be efficient and effective because, you can just go to another company.
Mm-hmm. There's no government contracts involved.
Right. It's the same with like people want extra taxes for government health care. But it's, again, if you have that, they have a monopoly, and people hate monopolies these days. Mm-hmm. But that gives the state a monopoly on it, which leads them to not having to be efficient, not having to be effective because there's no other option. Mm-hmm. I don't want the people in charge of the DMV and the VA in charge of everyone's healthcare. Yeah. And that comes down to, without taxes, who would do this? The people who need it. They would do it.
And there's a great quote from Ayn Rand. Somebody was arguing with her about the laissez-faire capitalism, total free market, and they were like, "Well, what are you going to do to stop monopolies?" And she said, "Well, without government, monopolies are not possible. In a free market, monopolies are impossible.
Absolutely. It's like Murray Rothbard was saying, competition prevents monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have all these roadblocks to come up with my product to compete with yours like the average person does now, then, I can actually have a chance in the market. And also, the market doesn't have coercive transactions.
Yeah.
And if it does, that's violating, you as a person, your rights. So that's illegal. People want to talk about what the government, corporations, which again are a government classification, which gives you special privileges from the government.
Right.
So if anything, having more government in the economy and dealing with things like that makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of ways, a big issue is, people see taxes as moral.
Yeah.
If you don't pay your taxes, you're not doing your part. It's always something society.
Right.
Why do I owe more to society than to my family?
Mm-hmm. Get a load of this society. Let's see here. All right. So I've got a quote from John F. Kennedy. Too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. How do you feel about that quote? Do you think it's true?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in like the social media age. I mean, look at Twitter. You can say what you want, have an opinion on something you're completely ignorant on, and there are absolutely no consequences.
Yeah.
You don't even have to acknowledge if people have facts to prove you wrong. You just block them.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's few things more dangerous than an uninformed opinion. I mean, there's people who don't understand basic economics that are trying to push economic bills and reforms.
Right.
I mean, and it's dangerous. Obviously, not all bad opinions are dangerous.
Right. Absolutely.
But when there's no price for being wrong, people don't take the time to make sure that they're actually correct.
Well, I am actually out of questions. Is there anything you wanted to discuss while you're on here?
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
All right. Here's the zinger for you. What would you see a taxless society like? Taxless and stateless.
It would be, and I think a lot of people associate, first of all, there's a big association between anarchism and chaos. People consider those like one and the same. But I've got this on lock. I've got the definition of anarchy from Merriam-Webster here. It is the absence of government or a state of lawlessness or political disorder due to absence of governmental authority. So it's basically, anarchy is really just the absence of state. Whereas chaos, the official definition of that, is like a state of utter confusion, a confused mass or mixture. So those are not the same thing. If we lost the state and we lost taxes, I think that it would become a society of voluntarism. And if we did, if we ran into problems like potholes in the road, you could take up well, nowadays you could build a website, be like, hey, there's a pothole on River Road. We'll take donations and we'll fill the hole. I don't see why people think that that's absurd or like can't happen, because like absolutely, I think if people did that now, like even with taxes, that it would happen. Absolutely. But then you had the argument of like, well, what about like police officers and stuff like that? Well, for starters, I don't think they're doing much anyways. Um, but, if somebody does something evil, I think that a society would find some way to ridicule, disown, or like disenfranchise this person and just have them like pushed out of society.
Absolutely.
So I think there's the benefits that I see in my mind just seem to far outweigh the benefits that we're getting from government at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Any arguments at this point against anarchism is all suppositions.
Yeah.
I mean, Lyndon Morris Tannehill even talked about how to outline like a stateless society, like, privatize the police, because if they're ineffective, you get a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, a big issue, you talk, about police not doing a good job. I mean, look at our judicial system. It's set up, crimes against society.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the state versus, the accused. Our justice system has become about revenge again for society, which always ends up with more money in the government's pockets
Mm-hmm.
and nothing for the victim. If we had if we had police that only, arrested people who violated actual rights, and a justice system set up for compensation of the victim instead of, revenge for the state,
Mm-hmm.
take the state out of that. It's all about compensating the victim for their, what happened to them.
Yep. And it's funny because like all the money, that's like in a criminal case, they have to pay, whether it's like bail or whatever it is, goes towards the state, which in turn does not help society at all.
Not at all. Plus,
So
the bail system is, definitely targeted towards poor people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I get, hit with a petty charge, I have like a $10,000 bail for a nonviolent crime.
Yeah.
I mean, and who has $10,000 lying around for stuff like that?
It's a lot of
So in
money.
that case, I'm still stuck in jail before my trial, even though I'm supposed to be presumed innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm being incarcerated and held against my will before I'm even convicted of anything because of the bail system.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, all that is money to the state to fund the same judicial, mechanisms that are locking people up for stupid victimless crimes.
Mm-hmm. It's just
Well,
so that they can do it again tomorrow and eat steak tonight.
oh
Like,
yeah.
it's not going
I mean,
anywhere.
and a lot of small towns have such ridiculous, fines and fees because they get a lot of their budget from it. Like, Dade County gets over 10% of their yearly budget from fines and fees and, tickets and things, petty charges.
Yeah.
Of course, there's no incentive for reform because that's where they get, a lot of their money.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they spend it on militarized police equipment.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I saw that Joe Biden recently made a statement of like encouraging people, encouraging local governments to use all of the COVID bailout money for police military expenditures, which is just like absolutely insane to me. I'm like, okay, so all this money that you gave us for fighting an illness, that like that's a whole other thing, but now that you recognize that it's not being used to fight the illness, you're like, oh, just buy more guns, which I don't like.
Absolutely. I mean, these are the same people that last year were saying defund the police.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's let's fund them even harder. Because, rural Rhode Island cops need riot gear.
Right.
Tear gas guns, small tanks.
It's
It's
so messed up.
honestly, it should be insulting to way more people than it is.
Yeah, people
I
should
mean,
talk about it more.
this is, what their beloved tax dollars go to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's definitely, certain neighborhoods that get it. Definitely the impoverished areas are the ones getting hit hardest by police brutality and ridiculousness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's insulting to the average person.
Yeah.
But they don't want you to talk about that. I mean, look at what we were taught 12 years in public schools. Taxes are good. If the state loves you,
Yeah.
they don't. They're bad. I mean, there's something creepy about keeping, the pictures of all our former leaders staring down on you for 12 years.
Yeah.
Imagine if they did that with anything else or any other group of people. You're taught that these are to be revered your whole life.
Yeah. Or any other group of people that's taught that no, every single morning while you're, growing up and being educated, you have to say this traditional chant every morning, to this piece of polyester. And it's like, what? That's so, if it was anybody else.
Right. It's, you have to respect dear leader.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, chant your pledge to the state, sing your propaganda songs.
Mm-hmm.
There's something a little cultish about it. Not to, rip off Tom Woods or anything, but it's very cultish. And if you don't think it is, tell someone you think it is, and they'll get very mad.
Yeah.
They died for this. No, they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you can condense what soldiers die for to a flag and a chant, you've missed the whole point of the sacrifice.
Yeah, and military is a whole other thing that maybe we can go into in a different conversation.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. Is there any charities or organizations you want to shout out?
Shout out to the Mises Institute. Just really keeping the Austrian economic school alive. One of my favorite charities. It's more of a charity app. It's called DonorSee. It's really great. Your money goes directly to the people that need it. There's no middle ground or anything, and you get to see through like email updates and things like that how you've helped those people.
Absolutely, that's awesome. All right, so let's see here, and I'm going to put some links in below to some private charities to help out your fellow human beings. But yeah, if you made it all this way through the video, thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me.